to discuss is Ben Shapiro, host of The Ben Shapiro Show and co-founder of The Daily Wire. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, like we said, big week for Nazis in America. This story with Platner is really wild. Maybe he knew it was a Nazi tattoo. Maybe he didn't. I think I would be a lot less offended by the whole thing if the left who is defending him now didn't spend the last decade calling people like you and me and anybody else in the MAGA movement Nazis. So how have you experienced this whole story?
I mean, I think that the funniest part of this is that many of the people who are somehow defending Platner and saying he just didn't know, it was all ignorance, which, by the way, if you get a giant tattoo on your chest, and that was a pretty big tattoo, I have a feeling that he knew exactly what that was. And apparently he'd bragged to some friends, that was reported by Jewish Insider, that he knew what it was at the time. But many of the people who are defending him are the same people who are perfectly willing to condemn as Nazis, like the Israeli Defense Forces, who are fighting actual, honest-to-God, modern-day Nazis in Hamas. It is all extraordinarily dishonest. It is the idea that there's any principle here is beyond. But the truth is I think you're referencing, there has been a warmth toward Nazi imagery that exists on the left. It exists on the right. I think the right has been better overall at condemning it and calling it out. But there is a sort of edgelordism that has risen on all sides as a result of the breakdown of our institutions and the breakdown of sort of moral voices of authority. And that means that there is a lot of trash that has become kind of commonplace.
So there is a big debate happening on the right about how to handle it. Some are saying, like you have said, look, wherever this trash rears its ugly head, you have to denounce it, whether it's on your side or the other side. Others have made the argument that no, there are no enemies to my right, only to the left. We should focus on fighting the left. And when this stuff rears its head on our side, basically we should have a more tolerant view towards it. Explain to us that position and why it doesn't fly in the face of the exact kind of principles that the conservative movement has been claiming to be building up all this time.
Sure. So I think that's really more a pragmatic position that then refracted through a moral lens. So my case has been that, morally speaking, you ought to be able to condemn bad things wherever they occur. And then pragmatically speaking, you ought not hand over leadership of your movement to the crazies. And that when you make room for the crazies, when you refuse to condemn the crazies, when you massage the crazies, you actually end up granting them an unearned leadership position and making them essentially immune from criticism, which gives them an upper hand. And this is exactly what happened pragmatically to the Democratic Party. Not only is that bad for your party, it's also bad for your electoral prospects, because it turns out that most Americans are somewhere in the middle. Most Americans are normies and don't particularly like Nazi ideology. To steelman the position, I think to steelman the position would be to say that if you have members of your coalition who engage in edgelordism or have bizarre views or even terrible views, so long as those views are the second worst views, you must actually side with those people in order to fight the people with the worst views. And that's sort of a coalitional argument. Now, again, I don't think that succeeds on pragmatic grounds. I don't think it succeeds on moral grounds either. But that, I think, would be the strongest articulation of that position.
Now, you have people at your company, The Daily Wire, who don't necessarily agree with you about everything. You're a big believer in free speech. How do you navigate that? On the one hand, having the widest tent possible, really supporting the free exchange of ideas, and on the other hand, doing all the things we're discussing here, fighting racism, keeping the sort of pro-Hitler element out of your coalition?
Sure. So I think that, first of all, we should make a large-scale distinction between deplatforming and also saying that I don't have to pay somebody to work for my company who violates my moral precepts or the moral precepts of the foundation of my company. I've never called for some of these figures to be booted off of social media. In fact, I've called for some of them who are quite egregious and whose followers threaten me on a regular basis. I've called for them to be restored to social media after they were banned from X or after they were banned from YouTube. That is a far cry from the idea that I have to treat their views with any sense of decency or pretend that their views are palatable or that they have some sort of right to work for the company that I am a founder of. And that, I think, is a really silly proposition. It's the difference between a platform like a YouTube and a publisher, which is what we are. We're a publisher. We get to determine the kind of stuff that we wish to have on our website and on our property. That is a different thing. So I think that distinction makes an awful lot of difference because, again, it's not anti-free speech to criticize somebody else's free speech, nor is it anti-free speech to say that you do not wish to expend money or support on people that you disagree with. In fact, that is an aspect of free speech. I don't have to spend money on people I disagree with. I don't have to pay them, and I don't have to patronize their businesses. I don't have to grant them a slot on the network that we run. At the same time, there's a difference between that and they should be thrown in jail. They should be thrown off of these kind of generic platforms that are not supposed to take a political position.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.